Hello everyone, and peace of God to all of you. I want to welcome you to this program called 1 Hour with Bernadette, Talia on Facebook Live through the Chaldean Radio. This program will be every Thursday on Facebook Live from 7 to 8 p.m. and it will be replayed on Friday in the evening at 6:30 p.m. and on Saturday at 2 p.m. in the afternoon on Chaldean Radio app. For those of you who were not able to watch it on Facebook, you will have that chance to share it with friends and listen to it on Friday and Saturday. I will begin this program with prayer, as usual, and end with prayer. The purpose of prayer is to receive blessings from God for our families and our communities. I also want to thank God for the opportunity to spend this 1 hour with you weekly. I feel privileged and honored to serve you as my community, and those of you who are not part of the community, you are also welcome to this program. So today's prayer is called Fostering Connection with God as Couples. Dearest God, our tendency is to turn away from you when we know that you have made us out of love. Despite our lack of faith and connection, you never forsake us. Instead, you gave us your only Son, our Lord Jesus, to redeem us to you. We are so self-absorbed with our own needs and wishes. Help us, Lord, to rely on your wisdom and guidance. Help us to be anchored in you. Please, God, give us your wisdom to mimic your love in our marital relationship, to help us turn to our spouse in love rather than turn away in resentment and carelessness. Intensify the security of love between us, Lord. I pray that this through Christ our Lord, your Son. Amen. Today's topic is called Fostering Connection with Couples, and I will be presenting it in English. For the next 3 programs, the topics will be how to deal with conflict in your marriage. The second topic will be how to deal with your in-laws, especially mother and daughter-in-laws. And then the third topic is appreciation and gratitude in your marriage. Next week, I will not be doing live Facebook. The following week on the 7th, there will be a program, and it will be on how to deal with conflicts, and it will be in Arabic. So now I will begin, as I do every program, with limits for what my limits are for the program. So I will not be providing counseling during the show. I cannot resolve personal issues. I am here to open the conversation regarding life challenges and daily problems that confront all of us as couples. I don't mean, of course, to suggest that your personal issues are not important, because I know it is very important, and emotionally these conversations, when they're charged, what happened, I think they need to be taken more with an individual professional who's going to evaluate the situation and be able to determine what the problem is for you. The other limit, also the other thing, is to call me by my first name. Don't call me Dr. Bernadette, in America, licensed clinical social worker with a master's degree, and licensed like myself is not called a doctor. In other countries, it may be the case. I am licensed in California, and I practice in San Diego. I will not be addressing political and or sexual preferences with same-sex relationship issues on this show. So that's also for your knowledge. For the personal privacy of you, the viewers on Facebook, I will not be addressing names of people, that where they're from, or those of you who are giving comments through Facebook. I will not personally respond to your comments via Facebook. I will definitely live try to answer these questions. I will pick and choose the questions and answers, and I'll do my best to see how I can answer these questions. And I will try to address the issues In the future, feel free to give me any suggestions on what type of topics you would like me to cover, and I'm happy to see if I'm able to help with that. I want to apologize in advance to those of you who would like me to answer your questions in a certain way. So I'm going to do, as I said, my best to see how I can be helpful. Thank you for participating, and I wish you the best. I want to thank you all of you viewers and listeners on Chaldean Radio and Facebook. Thank you again to all of those who have been contributing through your comments. I really treasure those, and I find that your comments and support is very, very important. This program will not exist without your support and without your contributions. So I am very grateful for your feedback. Thank you again for your kind words and support. May God richly bless you all and fill you with His love and grace. Again, I believe it is extremely important that every listener understands the purpose and boundaries of the show. Thank you again for participating, and hope you become a regular listener. I will do my best again to address topics that you wish for me to address. I'm open to any feedback, as I said earlier, so that would be a pleasure for me. Today's topic is fostering connection with your spouse. And the majority of my information is taken from Dr. Gottman. He is a researcher that does a lot of work with couples, and I am more bringing up his information. So real life romance is kept by a small effort. So if we're talking about fostering connection, we're not talking about having to really try huge steps. You don't need to do and put in a lot of effort. It is every small effort that you do in your marriage and with your partner. It's going to make, and it's going to really strengthen and help the connection stay much more stronger. So what we're looking at, real life romance, is about small effort. Connection demonstrates more between the two of you as couples, how each one of you values the other. You want to make sure that you are not making or taking each other for granted. That is the disadvantage sometimes as couples when we're married for a long time. You know, your wife is spending a lot of time cooking, taking care of children. You as a husband are working and really working to support your family financially. And you don't hear a lot of thank you for that from your wife. And a wife doesn't hear you also acknowledge her, whatever it is that she's doing to contribute towards your marriage. And so that is when we take each other for granted. So these connections show up when each one of us reaches out to the other. And reaching out is going to be in the form of turning towards one another. And you as couples, and all of us as couples, I'm also married, and so as couples, we're constantly trying to keep connection going, and it shows up as bids. What does that mean? Right? As simple as you make a suggestion. You say something to your husband, or you say, as a husband, say something to your wife. That's actually a bid, is what Dr. Gottman is calling it. And you're actually calling for that attention and affection or support from your spouse. For example, like I just said earlier, a comment or a question is a form of that facial expression, where either you're approving or disapproving, you're frowning, you look like you're disappointed in your husband, or you as a husband are disappointed in your wife. That is also a form of a bid, that it is either turning away from your spouse or turning towards, and it all depends on how your expression is. So the value of bids is to really reach out. It is to connect and act as, and connect with your partner, and again, act as partners that are really close to each other and that you care about your spouse. So these bits happen over and over and over again. So for example, if you find that you've said something and now you're regretting, it is really important, and this is what Dr. Gottman has seen, is if you make that repair quickly, to fix it and to admit that you've made this mistake, that is actually a connection, and you're making that bid to turn towards your husband, and that's a great positive step. Other examples of bits include making a phone call, right? You just kind of call and say, hey, honey, I just want to call to say hi. You write a note on your textbook, I miss you, or I'm thinking of you, I hope all is well. Those are all bits as well. something funny happened at work or something funny happened with family, and you say, I want to just kind of share that with you. You read a newspaper, you watched a program, and you want to elaborate about the newspaper or the article that you read. That is also by you connecting with your husband or your wife, you are turning towards them. What makes a connection meaningful is how you react to each other. That is really what's important. As I was saying, it's either disapproving or approving of one another. There are several responses that as partners we're constantly doing. And so I'm going to be talking about all these three responses, and they're very, very important to make the connection more strong. And these responses include turning away, and I'm going to share a lot of examples. The second response that often couples are doing is turning against. And the third response is turning towards. So what would turning away response look like, right? So you make a bid by telling your wife, hey, honey, I'm kind of really hot right now. Is there a way to turn the air condition? And the wife doesn't even respond to you and goes about doing her thing. She's ignoring you, right? And so that makes that response is turning away from you, right? So it does not really matter if ignoring your partner, if she did it intentionally or it wasn't intentional. The key here is that the result is the same. Connection didn't happen. So the purpose of this program today, honestly, it is to really help you pay attention to how you're responding to one another. And the power of connection and strengthening of the marriage, it's all in the way we are responding to each other. The problem with turning away, once in a while, we all do it, but persistence, turning away, if you're doing that constantly, and if that is happening a lot, that will lead to hurtful feelings. It will lead to increased conflicts. It will damage the relationship, right? So this is why Dr. Gottman, with his research for many, many years, he has found that this is really important, that he's drawn a lot of attention for couples to really pay attention to really see how you're responding to one another. So your pattern, generally, if it's a pattern that involves ignoring one another, or you can also involve in a way that your spouse talks to you, wife or husband, again, you are so preoccupied, your mind is all immersed in what you're doing, and you're not letting your partner know in this situation, you know what, I just need a few minutes. I would like to hear what you have to say. It is really important to me. That is going to be a much better, more effective than just I'm too busy and I ignore, right? So that's kind of what we're really looking at. Make a comment, right? A comment could be your husband will say, I just saw something on TV that just seemed really good. And then again, you're so preoccupied that you're ignoring or you say nothing. That is also turning away. So other examples, when you find yourself, where you'll find the turning away is going to look like as well, you as a wife, you find yourself repeating the same thing over and over again. And the reason as a wife or as a husband you're repeating yourself, it's because you're not getting the attention and the connection that you're desiring for your wife or your wife desiring from your husband to have. And so what happens, you find yourself repeating and repeating a lot. If you're doing that, you want to really make sure to check and see what is it that I'm needing, right? Sometimes it is when you're repeating yourself, you're hoping that your husband or your wife is, you're trying to hook them in, get their attention, to forgive you for something you did, and you're hoping that they are really listening and respecting what you're kind of having to say, and they're caring for you. And what happens when they're ignoring and you're repeating, you feel the disrespect and you feel that you are not really cared for by them. And so again, there are simple ways that you're responding in a way that you're avoiding and turning away, but that could also damage a relationship. So again, consistently turning away from each other is very bad for the relationship. And so what happens in their studies, Dr. Gottman found children as young, very, very at young age, he found that even at a young age, children, when they had a hard time engaging one another and sharing their fantasy with their peers, right, children their age, they fail to develop lasting bonds, right? So this turning away is something that doesn't end only in childhood. It continues on with you. And this is why we're bringing attention to if there is a pattern in your responses to your spouse, one that is an ongoing base that you are turning away from each other, it will be very destructive for your relationship. And you want to really monitor, because what happens as well, the spouse eventually, if this is ongoing and consistent, is what happens that your husband and or your wife become very hostile, meaning very angry and frustrated. Or the wife, if a wife is being ignored, she's going to feel very defensive and will turn against you kind of in a way that she doesn't want to listen to you as well. So what we're really hoping to accomplish with this program is that these areas, if that is the kind of response you have, you want to really work on it. Turning away also shows up more when you've got areas of disagreement. Your wife says, I want our kids to stay up a little later, and you say, nope, I don't want them staying up late, or I want them to sleep over at my mom's home. And then you as a husband will say, no, I don't want that. And then often when you're disagreeing on these topics, that's where turning away shows up. And unfortunately, again, if you're turning away so much, what happens eventually, it leads to early divorce among even newly coupled, wedded kind of couples that have just been married. This style of destructive, it is very destructive in a relationship, and you want to pay attention if you're the kind of person who's very preoccupied in your responses when your husband is talking to you, you're disregarding him and you're not paying attention, and he's needing to talk to you and you give him the silent response. It also shows up by interrupting one another, right? So either kind of your spouse will say, you know, I need you to do something, and he's talking, and then you're now kind of interrupting. And again, that is also turning away the topic that you're needing him to listen to, or you need her to listen to. She is not able to listen to it. So if a person turns, again, just like we said earlier, if you're doing this consciously or unconsciously, the message is the same. This really ends up hurting the bitter, the person, the wife, who is really wanting to connect with you, and the same idea with your husband. So the message that turning away sends to the spouses, husband or wife, is, I don't care about your bed. I want to avoid you. I don't want to listen to you. I'm not interested in your interests. I've got more important things on my mind. I am too busy to pay attention to your bed. I don't have time for all this stuff. Your bed is not worthy of my time. I want to be more independent of you. I'm tired of you. That's the message that turning away sends to your spouse. The second response is turning against. This one is more damaging than the turning away. What happens here, often the partner receiving the statement reacts with much more hostility, and they become very argumentative. So, and I will be sharing some examples. So here, what happens when you're turning against each other, the spouse is now, the husband is now hurt, and now the husband is insulted by this response. And as if this kind of behavior happens again over, and it's happening often, what happens at some point, if it's you, the husband, who is getting this kind of response from your wife, you start shutting down. You start feeling like, this is not important. I don't want to waste my energy. I'm just going to pull away. And sometimes the response that a husband or a wife will engage in by shutting down is not something that one stands there and says, oh, I'm going to think about how I'm going to really close down. It is an automatic response sometimes because it's a defensive response, just because you're finding yourself, you know, whatever you are saying that your wife or your husband is not taking seriously and they're turning against you, it shuts you down and it depresses you as well. And so what happens, Dr. Gottman calls the couple that are often engaging in turning against, he calls them their bits are more belligerent, meaning, and more argumentative. So a man might, dream of buying a car. You as a husband, you're desiring to buy a car or a sports car, and your friend says to you, gosh, dream on, right? So that would be a response of turning against. If your wife says the same thing, it's like, well, our kids aren't eating all the food, and now you're going to go be buying this car, right? So we want within reason. If you're able to afford it, that's fine. Turning against involves also sarcasm. There's a lot of ridicule. There's a lot of contempt. I want us to talk about buying a microwave, and a wife will say that to husband, and husband goes, really? Starts sneering at her and saying, well, what do you know about microwave? You don't know anything about that. His wife, after a while, again, just as we said earlier, starts shutting down, and it becomes more of a habitual that one ends up turning against each other without really this pattern, without noticing it. You just engage in this habit without really paying attention. And the reason I'm bringing your awareness to it is that when you find yourself doing it, the key is to immediately start repairing it and acknowledging, I'm sorry, this was really mean. The way I just said this, I didn't mean, by it to be sarcastic. And then again, I didn't mean to be so contemptuous in the way I said it to you. So if you continually work on expressing and acknowledging and admitting some of this behavior and responses that you are doing, your spouse will start, husband or wife, will start gaining some more trust in you. So again, belligerent responses are very painful. They're very hostile, and they're very contradicting as well, responses. So you want to be careful. A contradicting response, again, is going to be another form of turning against. It will be also an example that a wife will maybe has a tangerine in her hand, and instead she says, well, this is an orange. And you go, well, I don't know what's wrong with you, but that looks like a tangerine to me. How important is it to have that kind of response to your wife, right? What's important here is that you build instead of destroy. And this is what I'm bringing your attention to. So to please, if again, the other example would be is your wife will say, I need you to please, I need you to pick me up from this place. And then your response comes in, turning against her by kind of going, well, you better be ready at 5 p.m. I don't know if you're not going to be, I'm not going to show up. Critical responses also look like, honey, do you have a minute? So I would say that to my husband, and he'll say, well, I only have a minute. I don't have a lot of time to carry you and pamper you, to listen to you. That would be turning against, right? You see how quickly these responses could be that could really bring a big gap between you and your husband. So the other way it's going to be where I was exhausted today, the phone did not stop off the hook, and then you start responding as a husband, well, what do you think I was doing at work, right? So that's also another response that comes across as very critical, and it is very destructive, and it doesn't really allow for your wife to feel safe and comfortable to listen to you. And it has this tone of hostile, very angry. And it also, what it shares with your husband and with your wife is, I don't respect you. I don't value you. This relationship is not that important to me. I want to hurt you. I want to drive you away from me. Are you sitting there thinking about these responses? Probably not. But that is the message that your wife or your husband is getting from you. The ideal response that we want to get to is the turning towards. The most effective reaction to a bid is this kind of response. And so it's going to be where you're expressing interest and support. It doesn't have to be, again, gigantic steps. It could be small, tiny effort. There's an acknowledgement. You're following up with a smile. You're showing concern. Your husband says something and you're letting him know that you are listening to him. And what happens with turning towards, you're building a lot of this love, and you're putting it in the emotional bank, really account. And the more you put of this kind of love and the more you turn towards each other, the more you're building on this emotional bank account. And then the connection, what happens, it starts becoming more powerful. And the account, what happens as the account gets more and as you're depositing all of this positive towards the relationship, your conflicts start reducing as well. You will find that the connection between you gets a lot more stronger, and you start developing more a stable and long-lasting relationships that are really rich in good feelings for one another. And that goes a long way. As you're building on that, you're also strengthening your health. So like the couples that are really masters in their relationship. This is a term that Dr. Gottman uses, and what that means is those are couples that have survived conflicts and are able to dialogue about their problems, and no matter what is going on, what they disagree on, they find themselves still dialoguing and talking and connecting, even though they may not see things eye to eye. So it's the other thing that becomes also helpful when you're turning towards each other. You're going to find more humor in the relationship. There will be much more fun and more interesting and rich connection between you during your conflicts. You're going to find yourself managing and solving problems a lot better, and you're going to really avoid that downward spiral of negative feelings that destroys your relationship. So the turning towards consistently creates a healthy connection. It leads to a more closeness, more love and passion between the two of you. And it tells the bitter that I hear you. I am interested in you. I understand, or would like to understand. I'm on your side. I would like to help you, whether I can or not. I mean, just imagine hearing your husband saying that to you. That is like music to one's ears. I want to help you. I am here for you. I would like to be with you, whether I can or not. And of course, there are times that you're not going to be able to be there all the time, but just expressing it. I accept you, even if I do not accept all your behaviors, right? There's no way we can accept each other's behaviors. There are some negative behaviors that one does not want to tolerate, but I accept you, but I'm not okay with the other behaviors. So there's that balance here. Again, the scope of turning towards each other is very wide and includes the following nearly, even if it's a passive response. It could be as simple as, how's school today for your kids? Or your wife is a teacher. Okay. Even by her just responding, by you responding to your husband, that response is still turning towards. It could be with a very low energy that, it's my presentation today in class, the kids loved it. And, what I did today at work, it felt really comfortable. And you responding, oh, that's good. You don't have to say very much. Attention, again, being attentive and responding with attentiveness. It looks like I found some things on sale. And then you responding to that by saying, well, that's nice. It looks like that color really looks good on you. Again, there is some effort that you're putting towards each other. And what we're looking at, again, is this attention to your responses, validating one another. I've had an awful day, and you responding, wow, I'm sorry that you had an awful day. Instead of going, well, you know what, I don't want to hear it. That would be turning against or turning away as well. You look exhausted today. Yeah, I am kind of tired, but I think I'll be okay if I rest for a short time. High energy responses will look like a big hug that your husband gives you or a kiss. And those kind of responses are definitely solid and strong responses that help the relationship. So what we're looking at with all of this is your attention. Really, the focus of your attention to your responses is really important, that both of you as husband and wife pay attention to how you communicate, how you ask your questions, how you're talking to each other. And research is showing that happy couples will notice all the positive bits and attempts by the partner. Unfortunately, however, unhappy marriages, couples only notice half of the bits to connect. What does that mean? So if I'm unhappy in my marriage and my husband is trying and trying and trying, because I'm unhappy, I'm noticing half of how much he is trying to turn towards me. Unfortunately, over time, if we haven't worked on the connection and the way we talk to each other, it starts destroying and tearing on the relationship. So what we want to do is make an effort to notice these bits and really set your intentions to respond favorably to these bits, because ineffective communication requires us to pay attention and be mindful of my partner's bit. This is what we're saying, is pay attention to how you're talking. Once you know the value of how important it is to pay attention to your partner, it is in your hands, husband, and it's in your hands, wife. This is common sense, but unfortunately, most marriages are dying of neglect. They're not dying of abuse. It is not domestic violence and verbal that is killing a relationship and marriage. It is neglecting one another and paying attention to each other that a wife or husband feels starved in that relationship. And unfortunately, they find themselves looking outside for affairs. And I'm not saying that's an excuse. Of course, it's wrong to do that, but that is what's happening. So in order to understand this, you will need to practice exercising, turning towards each other, and really paying attention to your husband. So another example would be, and I want to just kind of use this example so you see what turning away and turning towards and turning against will look like. I'm kind of, for a wife is working outside in the yard, and a husband brings water to her just because she's been working for a while, and her response to him is going to make a difference. And if she is going to be turning against, she can say something like, wow, about time. I have been working on the yard for several hours, or about time I've been helping and working with our children. You just thought about giving me this? That would be turning against. Or he gives her the water, she takes it. There is nothing that she says to acknowledge him. Or she says, thank you, honey. I really, really appreciate you thinking of me. Do you see the difference in the way that the response can come? Again, it is in your hand how you're going to be really turning against each other or towards each other. Or away from each other, right? So if a husband, your husband is wanting you to make him a different kind of a special food or make him food, and again, your response could be by not even paying attention to him, or by just saying, gosh, I don't have the time, maybe I'll do it another time. Or you look at him and say, I'd be happy to really make some of this. I can make this one, maybe not that one. That is turning away, turning towards. And that is very helpful for a relationship. And that's what we're looking at. It is more of this effort. Your husband puts his hand on your shoulder, and that is also a bit that he is making to really connect with you. You can move his hand, that's turning against him. Or you can put your hand on his hand and thank him for just taking the time for a minute to be there with you. Or again, turning away would be as you're silent. You don't say anything. You take it for granted. You're kind of thinking, well, so what? That is my husband. He needs to really be doing that. So pay attention. These are all examples that I'm just kind of sharing with you how you can improve that connection and not take each other for granted. Marriages that are not attended to are marriages that are devoid of life. They have no life. So paying attention again to your marriage, you don't need to be doing giant effort like I said before, but just attempts, any small efforts, really both of you, at trying and taking responsibility to really do that. That is going to help the relationship, and it is going to help both of you strengthen that relationship. So some things as partners you can definitely do, and those things are very, very important, that each one of you takes the responsibility to start kind of doing that. You want to pay attention in your marriages as couples. Is there something that you need to commit to more? Is there something in the future that you need to work on? So think about your responses. Do you feel in your marriage that you are neglected? Right? Dr. Gottman states that the couples who ignore their partners emotionally, they're doing it out of mindlessness, not because they're not malice or doing it out of hatred. And again, we're just trying to really encourage you to be more mindful, to really improve that sense of romance between you and take care of each other in a way that you are interacting. So being helpful to each other is something that you need to work on and to bring that passion into your marriage. Some of the exercises that help turning towards each other are reducing, sitting down and talking about stress reduction exercises, kind of sitting down and just really talking about an area or a topic or something that you want your wife or your husband to listen to, but you want to just kind of be able to communicate it in a way that the two of you are understanding each other. So you want to be taking your spouse's side when you're sitting there listening to your husband. You don't want to be taking a side of the other person. You want to validate him emotionally. You want to be there for him. It's called a stress reduction for a reason. Again, there are more examples where couples fail to connect and problems, and I want to just share what some of the problems are that really happen and the impact of the turning against each other and that lack of connection. It impacts not just you as husband and wife, but it also impacts your children and it impacts your whole family. And anything, like I said earlier, that in childhood, if you've had those experiences where you couldn't connect with people, unfortunately it continues on in adulthood, and it makes it very difficult to keep a mate. So you want to pay attention if that is a problem for you. There is professional help for that, and I'm hoping you can take some of these tools that I'm sharing here to improve that emotional connection. These tools are also very helpful for couples that are dating towards marriage and partners that are just dating towards marriage. All of this stuff is really beneficial. So again, paying attention to reading the potential partner's cues. So pay attention to the eyes, pay attention to the frowning, pay attention when you say something, and really start listening to the body language and start appreciating. Please pay attention to finding things that you can be thankful for instead of things that you're constantly finding negativity in your wife and what she's doing. You want to really build a happy and a stable marriage, and to do that is you need to really be paying attention to your responses. So failure to connect is a major issue of our culture, unfortunately, and that is where high divorce rate is happening. So first, marriages are now facing 50% divorce, and unfortunately, if a person has already had one divorce, for the second marriage, the risk gets higher to 60%, and if you've been divorced twice and you're now on a third marriage, through research again, they found that the risk of divorce gets higher to 70% as well. So unhappy marriages are in a constant emotional turmoil. Study is showing that being unhappy married can raise your chance of getting sick, right? 35%, and by 35%, and it shortens your life by an average of 4 years. Again, this has all kind of been researched. Living is in that kind of state of stress can lead to high blood pressure. It can lead to heart diseases, and as well as psychological problems like depression and anxiety. And you'll find your immune system is also impacted, where you get sick a lot more and you get infections a lot more. Family problems can affect your children. Children living in such environment, what happens, they're chronically depressed as well, and their level of stress hormone is also very high. And where you find these kids are spaced out, they're getting a lot of flus and are sick often. And so you want to really be paying attention to the way that you are connecting with each other, because depression, again, as we're kind of been saying, these poor behaviors are leading to aggression and are leading to depression. And you want to kind of pay attention to your kids if you're finding them getting bad grades in class and in school. And again, these would be some of the reasons to why your children are not thriving in school. Your relationship is impacting, and we want to prevent divorce, because again, assigning a decree to divorce, they decide that I'm going to divorce, don't think that that's going to resolve problems. It often compounds the issue, and divorce brings a lot more. So we want to work on improving connections with your partner to prevent future problems. And there are some differences between men and women as well. When it comes to connection, husbands in happy marriages turn towards their wives a lot more, and men hold a very significant key to determining whether their marriage will succeed or not. And you know where the key for them it's going to be is, as a man, yes, it is important that wives are paying attention to their husbands, but it is more important, it's additionally beneficial for husbands to be mindful that they put their energy into the relationship and really pay attention to how they are responding to their wife. And that allows for a long, happy marriage much more. Also with wives and women, your sense of humor is very important. Your interest and affection towards your husband is an essential need, and that helps the husband feel more calmer during conflict. So really paying attention to that. Again, that predicts a lot of stability in a marriage. Wife, your positive expression makes really a bigger difference as well, because your husband is looking for that. It is really practicing of turning towards your husband in every interaction that is going to really strengthen the relationship, instead of turning against each other. And also, husbands, when you continually turning against your wife, what happens is your wife starts becoming really depressed and starts shutting down, unfortunately. And so what you want to do is pay attention if you're doing a lot of that and you find her frightened, because really men, when they're stressed out, what they found through research, they become much more aggressive a little bit more and become more argumentative. Women, on the other hand, their desire is to really connect and to tend and befriend when they're in that conflict. So we want to really be paying attention. Another theory, Dr. Gottman says, it might be that under stress, men tend to become more irritable and more critical, right, to women. So just kind of paying attention again to all of this, paying attention to how much stress you're in, that if you're into fight or flight often, that is a problem. Again, as a wife, calming yourself down and bringing that calm state is very helpful. There are also some bid busters that destroy connections and being mindless, not mindful like we've been saying, right? You're not paying attention to how you're connecting. You are not putting any effort in operating on a principle that your partner will not be there for you if you constantly are stressing each other out. And also noticing when you're that mindless of your criticism and you're constantly defensive. All of these are really bid busters. They destroy connection and that lead to more they don't lead to a formation of stable connection. It also, when you're starting on a sour note, meaning you've opened your mouth with negativity, your conversation is one that is attacking, and what you want to pay attention to is really pull back and just kind of say, whoa, I'm sorry, I'm blaming you, I'm very critical of you, or use harmful criticism instead of helpful complaints. You're looking for every flaw in one another, and you're focusing on only specific behaviors that are very problematic and negative. And the more you do of that again and being judgmental, that also begins to really destroy a relationship. And your wife, you're going to find her, if you're a husband who's critical like that, you're going to find her being more flooded and defensive, and vice versa. Same idea. Physical signs will include heart pounding, a sweat. You're going to find yourself being really irritable, even feeling hot. Rather than focusing on what your partner is saying, your mind is going to be more into defending yourself. Practicing crappy habits, right, of mind. You scan the world and you're coming in at it from a negative perspective. You find yourself, anything that is negative in the environment, you start really picking on that. Pay attention to those habits. The key is to scan your environment regularly for things that are helpful, that are nourishing, that are nurturing, and you want to be able to share at least bits that are going to be, or things that are really more positive. Also, the other area that really destroys relationship and connection is avoiding talking about difficult topics, right? You're uncomfortable about addressing an issue, and you just find yourself, I don't want to talk about it, right? So if those barriers you don't really start addressing and you don't start talking about them, these issues don't go away, right? And so if you're avoiding them, you're going to find the relationship is not going to thrive, and it's going to also create problems. And so if you avoid and deny and ignore negative feelings, those end up piling up after a while. So self-disclosure is what's needed. Admitting that I feel weak right now, admit that I feel helpless, admit that I'm not feeling so great about this, I feel overwhelmed, or I feel anxious, right? So again, those were all examples of how we destroy a relationship. Now, so kind of we stop with our the subject for today, and now I'd like to go to the story that I often try to share on this program. And this story there's a moral in it, of course. This story is called More Than I Asked, from God, of course. So this is from the book Amazing Grace by Jeff Cavin and colleagues. A man by a name of David, age 35, was going to see an oral surgeon. His dentist asked him to be on a safe side. There was a sore, he found something in his mouth and a spot, and kind of asked him to go and get it examined by a specialist. And then when they when they tried to kind of check what was going on with that, the report came back, and the report showed that there was cancer in the mouth, and that this person, David, was really shocked. He went home and had 3 children, told his wife, and his wife, with this diagnosis of cancer, was also very saddened. She called her brother, who is a priest, and shared with him that this is what my husband got diagnosed with. So he said to her, please ask him to pray for the intercession of Mother Teresa. While was this brother, her brother, the priest, while he was in a seminary, he found that in Rome, he found that he was really inspired by Mother Teresa's great spirituality. He sent them prayer cards, his sister and the husband, and David asked everyone to pray for him and had extra masses offered for him. So he desperately wanted his life to not have this cancer and wanted to live so he can really support his family. He was also full of anger at himself because for 15 years he was chewing tobacco and had an idea, as you know, when you're a smoker of cigarette or tobacco, is that there's a chance of getting cancer in the mouth and cancer in the lungs as well. And so there he is now beating himself up and blaming himself. And so he went into a surgery worrying as they operate to remove the cancerous cells inside his mouth. He didn't know if he was going to really survive it, what was going to happen, and desperately was begging God, just really, please God, I need your help. And he started asking Mother Mary and really for intercessions, and Mother Teresa especially. And so when the surgery was done, he was so scared to find out if the cancer was completely removed or what happened. His wife said to him that they removed 3 teeth, and they took all the tissue and the bone from that side. And subsequently what happened, the test results that came back were that there was no trace of cancer. No cancer at all. He was baffled. And so his doctor was shocked and baffled by this result. And he looked at the initial biopsy and saw that the tissue was definitely cancerous. He re-examined the tissue, removed during surgery, and no cancer whatsoever. So his family, David's family, his whole family sincerely believed that God healed his cancer through the intercession of Mother Teresa. Now fully healed, he persisted his story and ended up presenting it for Mother Teresa's cause for canonization, for sainthood, to the postulation, in Calcutta, India. So that was the story. And again, it is depending on God with your problems in your marriage and putting them in God's hands. Yes, they may not be as cancerous, but again, what we're talking about is problems that are neglected and end up piling on over the years, become like cancer inside. And this is where, if you're finding yourself helpless or hopeless, not sure how you can really change some of that, with God's help, you can do a lot of that. These are some reflections that I wanted to bring in. Simple basics of life are love, faith, and hope, and all is what we really need. We cannot undo the world's wrongs, right? We cannot undo all the wrongs that we've done in our marriages, but we can definitely affect the corner of the world we live in. So start paying attention to what you are doing. If we will just stick to the basics, right? And it is the basics, and this is from Dr. Sullivan. I got this reflection from. And this prayer is an inspiration from Pope Francis. Lord, we pray that you give us more faith as couples and community. Help us to be persistent beggars. We implore you, Lord, continuously, and your saints. We believe that prayer of petition, by its nature, is superior to other prayers. It is only when we are persistent beggars, and this is what we're saying, that we recognize ourselves as creatures. We're not going to know all the answers to all the problems that we're having in our marriages, but Lord, help us recognize, by definition, faith, hope, and charity constitute fundamental attitudes that raise us higher. We pray for an ecstasy towards you, our God. Faith and hope and love truly transcend us and make us go beyond ourselves. So fill us, Lord, with your faith, hope, and charity. And that's my prayer for the whole community and all of you listeners, to attend to all of our needs, to have happy and joyful marriages is our mission and our desire for the community, Lord, and those who are listening to this program. In conclusion, I pray that I provided you with sufficient information. I want to thank you again for watching on Facebook Live and listening on Chaldean Radio app. I hope you will become a regular viewer of this program on Facebook and a regular listener on Chaldean Radio app. I will meet with you again in our next program. Please don't forget to share this program with your friends and with your relatives, and let them know that this program is replayed tomorrow on Friday on Chaldean Radio app again. You can download it on your iPhone. It is an application, and you can hear the program replayed tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. and then in the evening, and then also on Saturday at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, you'll be able to also hear it. I would like to give a special thanks to all of you who are supporting and contributing to the Chaldean Radio. I encourage you to become a regular listener to help us bring this program like this to support the community. Please, you can go to the Facebook and look and press the area where it says donate, and you can fill in the information, and that is going to be another way where you help this program and shows like these grow, and we are definitely in need of your help, so we appreciate your support. I will make sure, as I said at the very beginning of the program, that I will bring different topics to meet the need of family. Not next week, right? So next week we will not have a live Facebook program. We will definitely have it the following week, and it will be on how to deal with conflicts in your marriage. The program will be in Arabic, how to deal with conflicts in your marriage, and then the following week it will be in English. I will do my very best to answer, again, as I said earlier, your questions and comments through the live program as best as I can. Again, feel free to share your feedback on Facebook and your comments and topics that you would like me to share. And I look forward to serving you next time. May God richly bless you. I am Bernadette, and I care about you.